Welcome, everyone. So happy to have you join us for this month's October 17th already, office hours. So our agenda today, we have an addition. In addition to compliance updates, monitoring and compliance updates regarding KPMG, we are going to be joined by Seth Walter, who will give governor's office updates and reporting updates. As always, we really want to be able to answer all of your questions. So don't hesitate. You can drop them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask away. So let's get rolling. So coming soon, we do have some new and updated guidance documents. New documents include blended versus braided funding. Another new document will be earned interest. We also have a new document that's a standalone capital construction document. It was previously folded into general capital expenditures. We did pull it out separately, and we updated the capital expenditures guidance document. Just a reminder, there is a new department closeout process that we have been using for a couple of months now. If you need to check into it, remind yourself. The recording and slide deck are available on our OSC ARPA page, and we have a step-by-step user guide that can be very helpful. A new twist to it, one of our new members of the compliance team, Jezra Snyder, will be initiating those closeout emails. So when it's time for you to receive notice, you have a closeout coming up, those emails will come from Jezra, but you will still work with whoever your assigned compliance liaison is in terms of the closeout. Just a heads up, we currently have at least a minimum of 70, and I think it's more than that, projects that are currently scheduled to close in December of 2026. That's a lot of closeouts to get done in a very short window. So I encourage you to close out projects early if you can, and to plan ahead, because it's going to be a little hectic. A reminder about the refinance grant and contracts policy. The funding source change letters for contracts and grants needed to be done by September 30th. Thank you very much to all of you who I know worked really hard and met the deadline. We appreciate it. Any new contracts or grants that are 100% general fund, like brand new, you haven't issued them before, and they went into place after July 1, then you can use the regular grant agreements and contracts, but please continue to send drafts to OSC for review. And we have updated the FAQ. Well, actually, we updated it previously, but just a reminder that that's a helpful tool to help you walk through all of this because it's a lot. We have been hearing from a variety of places the notion that projects that were SLFRF that have now moved to general funds, it is no strings attached. You can do basically anything you want. And that is not exactly correct. So to help clarify it, here are the things that change. When you do your quarterly reporting, which you will still need to do, the information that is required is a little bit different. The eligibility requirements attaching impact of COVID-19 will no longer apply. And for new projects that are utilizing capital expenditures for construction projects, infrastructure, then federal interest applied to those projects will not apply. The things that do not change, uniform guidance in 2 CFR 200 still applies, including all of those requirements, monitoring, cost principles, general grant management, closeout, etc. All of those things will still apply. The federal requirements cannot be removed from grant agreements. The statement of work remains the same. And there really is no additional flexibility for how subrecipients can use funds. So the project continues on. It is just the color of money changes with a couple of other changes as well. Additionally, I think there might have been some confusion that refinancing changes the end date that was previously established in legislation through HB 24-1466. That legislation was written to where it might give one the impression that the end dates could change. That's not the case unless that is specifically included in House Bill 24-1465. Otherwise, the originating legislation, the dates involved in the initial establishment of your project will still need to apply. So not everything shifts. We are still working on uniform guidance revisions. Continue using current guidance, grant agreement templates, etc., until you are notified by us. The grant agreement template should be coming fairly soon. And that was a top priority to work on those and get them revised in compliance with new uniform guidance. And our standard reminder, POGG ones are not allowed for SLFRF. Please do keep that in mind. Stacy, you want to talk about team assignments?
I can do that, Gail. Thank you.
Hey.
All right. So during last month's office hours, we introduced our two new staff members, Louis Pantalacci and Jessra Snyder. And a couple of weeks ago, we redid the team assignments. So this is an up-to-date list of who each one of the members of the compliance team, which departments they are assigned to. So if you are in a department and you have compliance related issues regarding SLFRF, please reach out to us. You'll see, and Gail already talked about this, but Jessra is also spearheading kind of our department closeout process, and Ernie will continue to spearhead the emails for the governor's office closeout process. So outside of that, Jessra, Louie, Gail, Gina, and I have department assignments, and Ernie continues to work on our special projects and our project profiles. All right, and then just real quickly, from a KPMG standpoint, we're kind of in the dog days of summer as it relates to round 2 of our risk assessment and monitoring activities. That we are getting dangerously close to being done with round 2. All of the risk assessment activities have been wrapped up. Monitoring plans, the majority of departments have received their monitoring, actually all the monitoring plans have been completed. The majority of departments have received a draft monitoring report. So we've actually completed 18 departments already and had 16 debriefs to date. So we are literally down to the last 4 or 5 departments and continuing to work with KPMG to facilitate access to additional documentation and answer questions related to the review of the transactions. So I'm hoping in the next 4 weeks or so we'll be able to wrap up round 2 risk assessments, and then we will shift to round 3, which will likely include relooking at different things that we looked at during round 1, which would be relooking at 2 CFR 200 compliance and the implementation of recommendations from round 1. So those are things to look forward to in the near future. Starting next week, I'm really excited that we're kicking off our subrecipient management workshop. We've got a workshop. It's a 3-day workshop, CPE eligible for the first 2 days. Day 3 of the workshop will be more of an office hours type of thing where you can get some individual technical assistance from the KPMG team. And so, next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, then we've got dates in November, and then December is a virtual option for those outside of the metro area. So I know next week we've got, I think, 55 or 60 people coming. If you're in a department and you had not signed up for one of the workshops yet, you can either email your strategy officer, or you can email me and I will get those names to KPMG because it is going to be CPE eligible. They are managing all of the invitations and will be providing all of the additional information. So looking forward to those. And then our last series of workshops will be in January after the holidays, where we'll be doing a couple of days on fraud awareness and avoidance processes and how to deal with fraud and grant funding. So looking forward to that. And then here's my standard reminder that we're still working with 4 or 5 agencies really closely to implement the recommendations from the round 1 risk assessment activities. So those, that's really important because we're about to circle back around and reassess where all the departments are. So we're trying to get the last 4 or 5 departments over the finish line. So At this point, I think I think they're all Gail's departments. So Gail is working hand in hand with the departments to get those over the finish line. So that's a KPMG update. Are we shifting
Thanks.
over to Seth now? Okay,
Thanks, Stacy.
thank you.
Did you call me out on purpose on that?
I did not. I called you because I know how much work you've put into it. So we're getting there.
So I would love to turn this over now to Seth.
Thanks, Gail. Thanks all. So we just wanted to take some time today to talk a little bit about what the next few months looks like, and to provide an opportunity for folks to ask questions in regards to implementing the last sort of component of 24-14-66, which has to do with basically recapturing unspent ARPA funds. So if you want to click the next slide. So this is just a little bit of a visual for folks to know where we're at. And again, there's a disclaimer at the bottom there. These are unaudited. Errors could be here. There are assumptions in here. The next real data that we can feel confident on is the stuff that Tammy's team is working on now and will be reported to the U.S. Treasury on October 31st. But we wanted to give folks sort of a sense of where we are as of a few days ago with the refinance in place. So with the refinance in place, about 2.9 billion has now been expended. A good chunk of that was spent last year in the personal service expenses right at the end of the fiscal year. So our expended number jumped quite a bit. We do still have about 1 billion encumbered of SLFRF there. And you'll notice there's a little gray bar at the bottom of that chart on the left. And that is a negative unencumbrance. That's kind of what was left or what we expect to be left that hadn't in core been switched over to your new appropriations, to your new general fund refinance, ARPA refinance portions. So we know that your agencies are still working through making all of those changes, and just want to encourage you guys to continue to do that work. And if we can, as good of data as we can get in the report to U.S. Treasury on October 31st, the better information we'll have to make decisions from for the next few months that'll take us up to the end of the calendar year. So keep working on that. We appreciate how hard this has been. This has been a really big lift at the same time as all of the end of year work that normally has to happen with your accounting teams has been happening. And so just wanted to say thank you for all of that. We're almost done. We're very close. So like keep pushing forward. And then we will be able to hopefully look fondly in the mirror at 1466 and never think about it again. But next slide. So this is just a bit of a calendar timeline for you guys and where we're at. So we're about in the middle of the process. So as you remember, June 30th, we made all of the transfers of SLFRF. On the July 1st, the general fund became available. On September 15th, we actually had to submit a report to JVC, which we did with the help of OSC, which was sort of just a snapshot in time. So we caveated that report with a lot of things are still in motion. We are not done, but here's where we are as of September 15th, which was called for in the bill. So what is left going forward? So according to the bill, November 30th, unspent and unobligated funds, except for those that are being held for personal service costs in the month of December only, would need to be encumbered. So on November 30th, you have to, is your last day to encumber those funds. According to the bill, on December 1st, any unspent and unobligated funds revert back to the governor's office, except those identified to pay for personal services at your programs for the month of December only. And then we have a vague reference to a reclassification process that the Treasury has not given us any instructions on yet. So we are really pretty hesitant to rely on that ability after sort of the encumbrance deadline of December 31st passes. So those are sort of the three rough steps going forward. I do want to acknowledge that in the financial manual, procedures manual that OSC put out, they requested that obligations that any encumbrance be put into core on November 1st, not November 30th. The intention there was to give us a month to sort through any problems you guys might run into, so that we wouldn't be spending December sorting through the problems. Instead, we could spend December making the transfers, and being wrapped up by the end of the calendar year, knowing that basically you lose about half the month for holiday leave and things like that. So the dates on this slide are from the bill, but in the financial procedures manual, we are asking obligations to be put into core by November 1st. I know Tammy's going to spend time next month talking about that process, and anything that we need to do there. So hold on to those. Unless you have something urgent, you can reach out to us. But if you have just general questions about that, what it'll look like, we'll have more information at next month's office hours. All right, next slide. So what happens on December 1st? So what we've been describing as the December authority states that on December 1st, the governor's office has the authority to reclaim any unobligated SLFRF dollars. This is not refi dollars. This is not the general fund dollars, only the SLFRF funds that have remained at your programs. And then we may repurpose those to pay for personal services at the agencies that we identified in the bill. So think about that as a recapture, right? Or a budget reduction. Like we do not have the authority to swap those funds with general fund, to backfill your program, to keep it whole. We only have the authority to remove those unobligated SLFRF dollars and then spend them quickly in personal service expenses at one of the 3 agencies identified in the bill. If you need to backfill those general fund dollars, that needs to go through the normal budget process at this point. So that would be submitting a decision item to OSPB, or if you don't, if you're our judicial friends who don't reply to OSPB, then you would submit it directly to JBC. But those would have to be handled like a normal budget decision item, with getting the legislature's approval and all of the things. So it's a supplemental. Think of it as a supplemental there. So that whole authority there is intended to make sure that we expend all of our SLFRF funds in a manner that doesn't leave us at risk of reverting them back to the U.S. Treasury, or just reverting funds to the Treasury that you didn't spend by the expiration of your programs on December 31st. So that process is going to be a kind of running process between now and the end of the year. So our office in the Office of Federal Funds and Strategic Initiatives here in the governor's office, as well as with your strategy officers who've been working on this, we've already started looking at these projects really closely and are going to scrutinize over the next 2.5 months all of the SLFRF funds that are unspent. That includes encumbered dollars. So why I bring that up is we have the authority to move unobligated funds. If you have an obligated fund or an encumbered fund, but you know is not going to be spent, we need your help to deobligate those and then move them to the governor's office to be recaptured. And part of that process, or the method we're going to use for that process, is the pre-reversion transfer, which we rolled out earlier this summer as a way to basically move funds back to the governor's office like you would at the closeout process when you revert unspent funds. But we want to revert those funds before the project ends. So I'll talk a little bit about what that process looks like. So on the next slide. So what is a pre-reversion transfer? It's a process to return SLFRF funds that you know will not be spent to the governor's office before your reversion transfers that you usually would make at the closeout process. So what is that process? A rough high level is, first step is to identify what those funds are that will need to be transferred, and then to contact your strategy officer, formerly recovery officers, or Jamina Abelar in our office. So we just need to alert us that hey, I have a project. The subrecipient has already told me that they're not going to spend all the funds. And so we want to send back, $127,000 from this project. That may require your agency to deobligate or de-encumber those funds, which could mean that you would need a contract amendment. Every project is kind of unique, and so there's not a standard method for deobligating those funds. If you have a contractor that isn't going to spend the funds and has notified you, we will leave it up to you and your contracting team on how that process needs to look. Or you can reach out to the reporting team as well to see what you need to do in core. But that step may need to occur, and we leave it up to your agencies to decide how to accomplish that. So that gets us to step 3, which is where you would request a financial summary from your reporting liaison. And they would run a financial summary as if we were closing a project out, to look at all of the transactions, to make sure things are assigned correctly and there are no outstanding liabilities or any extra miscellaneous things in your core record keeping. So they'll run that financial summary and then identify a list of outstanding action items that need to be accomplished in order to, quote unquote, clean up your books before we'll do that transfer. So work with your reporting liaison, your strategy officer, or Jamina in our office if you have questions about what that process looks like. But we'll run those financial summaries just like we would at the end of a project during closeout. We're just going to run it early, identify the funds, and then that document, that financial summary that has a pre-reversion transfer tab added to it, will act as the authorizing documentation for your transfers. So then you would initiate the ITI transfers with the governor's office, with Alexis in the governor's office. And then once that money has been transferred, you'll produce a BA 001 and a GA 999 to show that those transactions occurred and that everything on both ends is clean. Those reports would then be all saved in your project folder in the shared drive for documentation purposes, and we will have received those funds. When you close out at the very end, you'll notice in our certification document, there is a line that asks, were there any pre-reversion transfers and then any final reversion transfers? We would just sum those and show that all there. But when we close out the project, your reporting liaison will once again run a financial summary. And if there are additional funds that need to revert at that point, that's how we'll capture those. Hopefully, that is just a 0 and we just run that. If it is all still the same and nothing has changed, you won't need to reproduce a BA 001 or a GA 999. All of that stuff will just still be accurate from your pre-reversion transfer, and then you'll be financially closed out. If you have further questions about this, there is more information in the Refinance of Federal Coronavirus Relief or Recovery Funds Fiscal Procedures Manual Addendum, section 3.8.99. So you can reference those there. You're also welcome to reach out to Jamina, Alexis, myself, your reporting officer, or your reporting liaison, or your strategy officer if questions on any of that. All right. So this is a little bit of a visual of what Gail already talked about. These are the projects that need to close or have financial summaries due at the various times. So as you can see, that first column is all of our projects that ended prior to 6/30/24. We got about 24 of them that are in the very final stages of finishing their closeouts. We'll want to make sure that we're finishing those up. I think we've done a pretty good job of identifying if there's reversions there, so those ones just need to get wrapped up. What I want to bring your attention to is the 2 columns in the red box. So these are projects that ended on 6/30/24, so ended last summer. Hopefully most of these are getting very close to being ready to be closed out formally. However, if they're delayed for some reason and you can't close them out formally with the certification and the normal process, but there are reversions that need to be sent to the governor's office of SLFRF dollars. Please use the pre-reversion transfer process to get those funds to us as quick as you can, so that we can account for them and spend them before we have to, our encumbrance deadline passes and we would have to send them back to Treasury instead. So those projects should really be ongoing right now in the closeout process. And if you need information about how to close your project out, please reach out to your compliance liaison and they'll walk you through that. This third column is the one that's the most difficult. These are projects that will end on December 31st, 2024. But that is also our obligation deadline. So normally our project would end and you would have, 3 months or so to get final invoices, pay final things, clean up your books, get everything sorted out, and then close the project up. Unfortunately, because of the obligation deadline in the American Rescue Plan Act of December 31st, 2024, we need to be really good partners between all of our teams on those projects and any potential reversions that could happen there. Because if there are funds that don't end up being spent by your projects, we need to have time to be able to quickly move them and obligate them to personal services and expend them within the state so that we don't have to send them back to Treasury. What does that mean? That means really being on top of every subrecipient and making sure that you're asking and understanding every, final invoice that's coming in, what that invoice will look like, when you're going to expect it, and any of those things, so that we know if there are going to be unspent funds, that we would use the pre-reversion transfer process to give those funds back to the governor's office in a timely manner so that we can get them expended. I think that's everything on that slide. Yeah. So things to focus on now. I would first and foremost triple check the September data that you're currently submitting to the reporting team for the quarterly report that they will transmit to Treasury on October 31st. Make sure that all of the refinance budgets and allocations are correct in core, and that you have shifted over any encumbrances that may have been on SLFRF but need to change to refi, that you're getting those things sorted out quickly. That will give us the best information possible, the best data, in order to make the decisions on which funds we need to recapture, or just frankly spending a bunch of time answering emails from myself about what's going on with these funds. So if you get that stuff cleaned up in core and that data really clean that you send over to Tammy and her team for the quarterly report, the easier it will be for all of us for the month of November of really understanding where every SLFRF dollar is. Second, the Office of Federal Funds Strategic Initiative, formerly Recovery Office, has asked all of our strategy officers to meet with every program that has unexpended SLFRF, not unencumbered, unexpended, and really understand the plan on how we are going to meet both the encumbrance and expenditure deadlines for those funds. This is our last chance to correct anything or to move any SLFRF dollars out of programs that won't be spent and get them spent somewhere else. We've asked to prioritize projects that have large unspent SLFRF amounts, and we're looking at that data as it comes in. We're looking at our data that you all provided us in early September, but we're mostly going to rely upon that October data because we know that that will be after much of the refinance has been completed. And then just a reminder, if you have SLFRF that will not be spent, even if it was encumbered, especially if it was encumbered, we will need to also revert those funds to the Gov's office via a pre-reversion transfer process. And then finally, highly encourage you guys to finish any pre-reversion transfer and/or financial summary, final financial summary as part of closeout as soon as a project finishes. Just because a legal end date might give you until December of 2026, if you're done with the project, you know it's over, no more spending will occur on it. Don't wait until that timeline concludes. Go ahead and finish up and do your closeout process now. It's just one less project for all of us to pay attention to and continue to monitor. And it'll also just save us all time, like Gail talked about, when we have 70 projects that all close at the very end of this process. So really keep on top of those and get them as completed as soon as possible. And then just a reminder that any pre-reversion transfer takes time. About 2 weeks is if you know what you're doing and don't have any issues. I would say it's probably more than 2 weeks if it's your first time doing one of these, just to understand all the different pieces, or if you run into some big issues that require a lot of changes. And I will say that in order to do a financial summary or a pre-reversion transfer, it does require the dedicated attention of accounting staff. And if you have that time, if they know that they need to focus on this, these can go relatively quickly. What ends up taking a bunch of time is if there's a lot of back and forth and days or weeks go by between those emails, when these can sort of be probably simply completed with a couple of changes. If we don't have that dedicated attention, these can really drag out. So know that that's a liability, that's a risk, and to start these pre-reversion transfers or financial summaries as early as you can. I believe that is it.
Do you want to stop and find out if there are questions?
Happy to take questions.
Anybody? Questions?
I do have one.
Great.
Go for it.
All right. This is Catherine, though, in case you can't tell who's talking. So I've been talking with some of the IHEs about the need for obligations and encumbrances past December for their capital projects. And some people are telling me that they have open purchase requests, which I think would be handled in the same way as a GAE for them. Does that sound valid? And I realize that I'm probably directing this to Tammy more than anybody else.
I'll happily let Tammy answer that question.
You know, I'm gonna have to take that back. I think that effectively means they do have a contract with a vendor to do work. Just the dollar amount of that work is not set, and whether that counts or not, I think we probably need to take that back and specifically discuss.
Okay. And then let's see. So I'm looking at a particular one for, I actually forget who this was from, one of the community colleges. We have an internal process with purchase requests, which then become contracts, purchase orders upon completion. So they're saying, they're asking, when we say encumbered, are we talking about having a contract signed with a construction firm or an internal purchase order set up? So just some thought processes out there about what obligation might mean.
I can answer that one. So we would need a signed contract with the vendor, not the internal process would not satisfy the treasury obligation requirement.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions?
Well, if you do have questions, you're always welcome to reach out to me or my team, and we will get an answer to you as quick as we can. Thanks all.
Thanks, Seth. Tammy, I'm turning it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Gail. So what I'm showing here is just statistics as of the last time that we reported. I think what Seth showed you earlier is more current than any of these figures, so I'm really not going to delve into it. As Seth said, we spent a whole bunch of money in July on personal services due to the refinance. We bumped up over $1 million pretty instantly there, and we will have spending from beyond that June to September to further boost that up. So we're going to keep seeing those numbers go up, which is a good thing in terms of utilizing the dollars we were awarded. You could go ahead and flip to the next slide, Gail. And I'm not going to talk a whole lot. We are in the middle of the reporting cycle right now. As of this point, you all should have submitted your information to Gravity. I just did want to remind you of the things that we are looking at this quarter, in addition to the regular things we look at, given the fact, as Seth mentioned, we really need to start figuring out exactly where we're at on obligations. So kind of the focus of what we're looking at is to put a little bit further emphasis on that. So we do this every quarter. We do make sure that your obligations don't exceed your budget. The portal doesn't allow us to do that, but I think the reason I mention it is that due to the refi, I think we probably have more instances where we might see that occurring just due to the timing of getting funding source change letters out and signed and core updated and things like that. So we will be looking at that as usual, but with just a little bit further eye to did the refinance trip anybody up anywhere. We'll also be focusing on GAE obligations, and that's only because GAE is a very generic encumbrance document in the system. It may mean there's an underlying agreement, legal agreement. It may mean there is not. So as part of our process for GAEs, we ask for verification that the legal agreement did actually, in fact, exist that ties to that GAE. If not, we do not want to report those obligations to the Treasury. And then this quarter, we also implemented Treasury's new FAQ that interagency agreements could be obligated if certain criteria were met, and the state standard template generally would provide that criteria automatically. With the caveat, we didn't expect all interagency agreements to convert, only those interagency agreements that were necessary to be obligated to meet the deadline and would not be spent by the recipient by December 31st, 2024. So far, we're certainly in the middle of the process. We haven't seen a lot of that, but that is definitely something that is new guidance and a new way to ensure that we meet the obligations. So where we see that, we're focusing on making sure the reporting is right between the originating agency and the recipient. And then just the other caveat that's a little, it's refinance related is the fact that the refinance was an estimate. So there were quite a few instances where projects were overspent on federal because of the estimation process. Just the reminder that we are looking at seeing everything that was spent in federal through 24 to be reported as federal in Gravity. We will update the U.S. Treasury to update the budget to be sufficient. It's going to go ahead and go behind through the over expenditure process and give back federal budgets to do that. So those are kind of some of the things that we're touching on this quarter that are kind of a renewed focus or new things due to the refinance and the upcoming obligation deadline. We did do a whole session around what things would look like due to reporting refinance projects and these things I mentioned here on October 1st before the Gravity reporting was due. There is a link here to that training if anybody needed to go back and take a peek at any of it. And so with that, Gail, if you'll flip to the next slide. These are our reporting contacts. Nothing has changed since the last time we have met, and you are probably hearing from those folks now as they're working through reviewing the information that was submitted in Gravity. And then here we just have our general resources, our website, our mailbox for sending questions, and then we also have our reporting calendar. And with that, Gail, I'm open to questions for me, or I'll turn it back over to you if there are other questions.
Thanks, Tammy. Any questions at all? Now's the time. Speak up. Don't be shy. All right. Well, I guess there are no questions. So thank you very much. Oh, I see something in the chat. Oh, the question is, are POGG ones permissible with the refi dollars? Stacy, you want to respond?
Great question, James. Is Bob on the phone? I would like him to respond.
It's called a pass it along, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if Bob's here or not. James, we will
We'll get
get
back to
back to you with that answer.
Yeah.
Good question. Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Our next office hours will be on November 21st at the same time, same place. So until then, have a good one. Enjoy Halloween if you're so inclined, and see you in November.
Thanks, Gail.
Thank you.